Revenge films.
2 years after being married to my husband, we found out I was pregnant for the first time. We were originally both working full-time, but we discussed wanting to have kids, so I quit my job and focused on building a family. And soon after it happened, we were both thrilled. It was my first pregnancy, so there was a lot I didn't know. But a lot of my colleagues at work already had children, so they taught me all kinds of things. Not only that, but in order to reduce my expenses, they gave me baby clothes, strollers that they no longer use, and various other items that really helped save me. Of course, my parents were thrilled, but apparently my mother-in-law always wanted a grandchild. So when we told her about the pregnancy, "Really? I finally get to become a grandmother!" And she was ecstatic. Without any major issues, the weeks went by steadily, and I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. And my goodness, was she cute! My husband and I were in love! My husband also prioritized our baby and helped out a lot. And because she slept so well, we were saved. From the moment the baby was born, my mother-in-law was all over her. "Oh, how cute! I finally get to meet my granddaughter!" But my father-in-law was on a short-term transfer right at the time and outside of the state, so his introduction was delayed. As soon as he came back, he came over to our apartment with my mother-in-law, but when he arrived...
"What is this? Are you sure it's a human? Why is it so ugly?"
he said. But to be fair, when I gave birth, I was also shocked at how bald the baby was. The baby's hairs on the newborn baby's forehead and cheeks all fell out, but then, for some reason, her hair on her head also fell out, and she was seriously practically bald. But I couldn't help but think, is that the first thing you're going to say to your grandchild? My mother-in-law said, "That's because she doesn't have any hair yet, just like you." She lightly dissed her husband, but in return,
"But when we had our son and our daughter, they weren't this bald, were they? And I know they were a lot cuter than this."
As he gazed disappointingly at the baby. I went through 9 months of pregnancy and finally got to show a grandchild, and I couldn't understand why this was his reaction. I was feeling worse when he spoke again.
"A baby this bald? Are you sure she doesn't have a sickness? There must be something wrong with her body."
And he continued with the horrible words. I didn't know how to respond and stood there in disbelief when his wife said, "How dare you say such a thing? This is normal for a newborn baby. I came all this way with you. Please don't say such rude things." After saying that to her husband, "I'm very sorry, Ashley. Please don't mind anything this person says," as she tried to cheer me up. My in-laws eventually went home, but my father-in-law's words were circling in my head. I asked some other moms about it, and they said, "That's totally fine. As she starts to grow, she'll start having the fluffy hairs in no time." They tried to reassure me, but I was overwhelmed with anxiety at the thought that maybe she might be really sick. That night, when my husband came home,
"My parents were there today, right? Were they happy?"
he asked nonchalantly without knowing anything, and my anxiousness overflowed and tears fell out of my eyes. My husband was taken aback.
"What's the matter? Did something happen?"
He asked me, so I told him honestly about what his father had said and how concerned I was. Upon hearing this, my husband was furious. He immediately ran out of the house and headed towards his parents' home. When he arrived there,
"How dare you say something so horrible to Ashley! You really crossed the line! And not only that, but saying something so awful to my precious daughter? You know she can hear every word you're saying, right? And she can see everything? And yet, you're saying something so terrible towards your granddaughter. She doesn't need a grandfather like that! Never come to our house ever again! And I'll never let you see my daughter ever again either!"
he lost it on them and came back home. Apparently, they were shocked at my husband's anger that my father-in-law was at a loss for words. My mother-in-law called me straight after. "I completely understand why my son is so angry after his precious family was spoken of like that. My husband seems like he regrets that after being yelled at by his son, but you can leave him alone for a while. He did it to himself, so there's no need to worry. I explained to him afterwards that it's very common for babies to have thin hair, but this is what happens when you can't consider other people's feelings before you speak." My mother-in-law was over it too. When my husband got back from his parents' place,
"You don't ever have to let my dad see our daughter again. I'm so sorry. She's such a cute daughter. My father's eyes are just rotten.
And he was still angry. After that, as my husband said, my mother-in-law came over often, but my father-in-law wasn't allowed to see her. Even on celebrations, only my father-in-law was banned from entering the house, and eventually, he began to feel sad about it and started calling me every day.
I am truly so sorry about what I said. Will you please let me see my grandchild?
And he began asking me directly. I could tell that he truly regretted what he said, so I thought maybe it was about time to let it go. But my husband had no intention of forgiving him anytime soon, and in the end, this continued until my daughter's first birthday. To be honest, my father-in-law was wrong, but I didn't think my husband would get this angry either, and I was also shocked. At some point, I said to my husband, at the time, I was so sad I cried, but don't you think it's time we could forgive your dad? It seems like he really regrets it. But my husband said that we are truly his precious family, and because our daughter was our first child, that's why he couldn't forgive his dad. And so the day of her birthday, my husband happened to have the workday off. So from the morning, my husband was out playing with my daughter. During that time, my mother-in-law and I went out shopping together, and were preparing the feast for tonight. That evening, after playing for the whole day together, my husband and my daughter came home. But then, not long after, suddenly the doorbell rang. I wondered who it might be, and when I opened the door, my father-in-law had come into our house. It was down on his knees.
I was wrong. Please forgive me. I want to see my granddaughter. I want to celebrate her birthday together.
He cried as he apologized. My father-in-law was really sobbing and was apologizing from the bottom of his heart to my husband and I. Seeing his own father like this, my husband must have realized how much his dad regretted it.
This is your last chance.
He said and forgave him, and he invited his father into our house. After that, when my father-in-law saw our daughter who had grown much bigger and turned 1 year old,
Wow, look how cute she's become.
And he was bouncing off the walls. And my mother-in-law threw in a jab. And look, her hair has gotten so fluffy, unlike somebody else. And dissed him. For the record, my father-in-law's head was in a sad state. Despite how much I worried about my daughter's hair, just like everyone around me said, as she began to grow bigger, her hair started to grow, and there was no need to worry.
You've gotten so big. I'm so sorry that your grandpa said such a terrible thing. I promise I'll never say anything like that ever again,
said my father-in-law as he picked her up. After that, we all celebrated my daughter's first birthday together. We laid out the food that I made together with my mother-in-law, and we enjoyed the birthday cake that we bought for her. My father-in-law said that he always had a bad habit of saying unnecessary things, but after that one incident, he said he really tried hard to change that and apologized again. Over the last year, every time my mother-in-law would come to see our daughter, he thought he could join normally, but my husband was still angrier than expected, and apparently he was apologizing where I couldn't see it, but my husband refused to forgive him. Apparently my father-in-law tried to say he was joking at the time, but he really angered my husband, and he said he regretted it. And then he found out from his wife that we would be having a birthday party for our daughter's first birthday. He thought if he couldn't join now, that he would never be able to see her for the rest of his life. That thought made him determined, and he ran to our house and did whatever it took to be forgiven, he said. To my husband, he said,
I am truly so sorry. Thank you for letting me see my granddaughter.
After that, apparently my father-in-law was carrying quite a lot of regret, and now, before he speaks, he says he always thinks about it first in his head before opening his mouth. Well, I really couldn't forgive my father-in-law said back then, but after being shut out by everybody for a whole year, I could tell how difficult that was for him. So I truly am glad that we are all able to celebrate happily together. Perhaps my daughter was happy to see her grandpa too, because she was loving being picked up by him. And this time...
Aw, you're so cute. You're just so cute!
And from start to finish, he was all over his granddaughter. They often say that the mouth is the root of all evil, but I think my father-in-law really felt that to the core this time. But I think from now on, he's going to become a wonderful grandfather to our daughter.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.